Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thrilled to have you here. I am excited because this is one of the episodes where I get to dig a little deeper with someone one-on-one. So stick around and just know that every Tuesday and Thursday, a new episode comes out at bizbookpublishinghub.com, or you can go to the new link, bizbookpubhub.com. Today's guest empowers authors to transform their ideas into beautifully crafted, market-ready books that captivate readers and elevate their messages. He's a master storyteller and book design expert who creates visually stunning books. With a background in graphic design and over 14 of his own published books, he understands both the art and science of storytelling, from what to say, to how to say it, to why they'll buy it. As the founder of a high-end book design studio, he has produced over 60 books for authors spanning memoirs, novels, and business books. Combining a deep understanding of typography, design, and publishing technicalities, he helps authors avoid comfortable clichés and achieve their publishing goals with style and precision. Drawing his own adventurous experiences sailing across the Atlantic and exploring the Bahamas, he brings a unique perspective to his work. His personal storytelling journey shapes his approach, helping authors craft messages that resonate deeply with readers while aligning with their overall publishing success strategies. Whether designing books, coaching authors, or training professionals in the art of business storytelling, he is passionate about transforming ideas into impactful stories that inspire action. Please join me in welcoming Dave Bricker. Dave, welcome to the show.
Hey, Robbie, great to be here. And keep going. I was enjoying that.
Yeah, me too. When I write
Thinking,
these
who's
up,
this
it's like,
person?
you're impressive. I want to hear the origin of this, though, because we don't start out our lives knowing we're going to become an author, but some of us maybe by age 4 figured it out. But when did you first get the idea that either writing or storytelling, where does the hook start for you?
I think it really started in childhood. I mean, my father was a real word nerd, and I inherited this habit from him, like reading things backwards and finding what's there. Did you know that university spelled backwards is it is revenue? I mean, there's all sorts of wonderful ironies hidden in words, but wordplay, poetry. I still have poems I wrote when I was a teenager, and I've just always been writing. Eventually got into graphic design. Somebody contacted me to design some book covers and do some typesetting. And then the manuscripts weren't where they should be. And I started suggesting changes and I fell into editing. And then it was like, well, if this person can write a book, why can't I write a book? So I started writing books. And 14 books later, I'm still writing, blogging, working with writers as an editor, as a designer. And the process in many ways is similar to graphic design.
Hmm. I'm curious, what year was it that you first started writing your own book?
I think I did my own book for the first time. I'm going to guess 2014, 2012, something like that. Now, back during my sailing days, I started writing a book and I had a rough manuscript. It was sort of a sailing memoir, but it was really not fit for human consumption. It just, I wasn't there yet. And I had to let those stories percolate for about 20 years. Eventually, I wrote that book. But that's the long answer to your short, simple question.
No, what I love about this is that this is, in some ways, a fairly recent phenomenon, and yet 14 books later. But you also have been a graphic designer for a very long time. That's the majority of your life. You were doing graphic design. It makes sense that someone would come across you and say, "Can you help with a book?" I will tell you though that my cautionary tale on this is I have a graphic designer that I'm good friends with. I met him around 2000, and he worked for a company, and I got to know him personally and we stayed in touch. And when my first book was coming out, 2017, I asked him to help me with the cover, which he did. And it's a very nice cover. But I have since learned that it is not a traditional design for a book. Like, being a good designer and being understanding what a book cover looks like. Could you speak a little bit to this? Because it was definitely something that I didn't know the nuances to ask, like, what other books have you designed? Like I knew he designed brochures and things for nonprofits and invitations, but what's the difference between that and like a book designer who, like you, really understands what the cover should look like?
Well, there are two elements. One is the cover and one is the interior. And I think that when it comes to quote unquote traditional cover design, there's this school of thought that says, well, the book's going to sit in a bookstore, presumably on a table. Somebody's going to walk by, it's going to grab their eye, they're going to read the back cover and say, okay, this is interesting. They're going to open it up and they're going to read the introduction, whatever it is. That governed traditional book design for a long time. And then eventually that book's going to get put on the shelf where the spine has to be interesting. The reality, especially for indie authors these days, is that book's never going to be in a physical bookstore on a table. So I think it's part of the designer's job to figure out what is the retail journey that that book is going to go on. And if it's not going to be in a physical bookstore, then have some fun with it and make it stand out, because you don't have to dovetail it with a certain merchandising strategy. And then when it comes to the inside of the book, very few people know how to do old school typesetting anymore. It's like watchmaking. And go to an antique store and open up a book. I don't care what it's about. You open it, it's beautiful. You just want to read it. There's something invisible about it that just draws you into the look. The spacing is there. Now, big publishers ship books by the boxcar load. So they use tiny type and tight line spacing and wide margins, because if they can shave off 50, 60 pages per book on a boxcar load of books, that saves them a lot of money on shipping and production. Now, again, if you're an indie publisher using print on demand, why would you emulate the look of mass production? So I think there are a lot of opportunities in indie publishing that are not available to traditional publishers, but that, to circle back to your question, the designer needs to understand what the differences are and help that particular book on its particular journey.
I love that you describe sort of what had been the case for books up until the revolution of print on demand, which is still relatively recent in our history, and designing for what's happening today, depending on that route that you take. The lesson I think I learned was when I thought about my beautiful cover for my paperback as the Kindle book cover on Amazon. The type was just not big enough. The image was not bold enough. And I also had to ask for a little rule around the outside. I don't know if that's really what it's called, but it's a white cover and it's on a white website. And I was like, oh, give me something to like make it separate. And I've seen a lot of white books not have that, because I now dive in. I've seen a lot of books on Amazon. That's the work that I do. So like you said, understanding how it's being used and the journey that it's going to go on. I think that's probably the strategy more than even knowing the design. It's like understanding how it's going to be perceived. So really appreciate that. And the typesetting, I mean, tell me the kind of client you work with who appreciates and is willing to invest in typesetting, because that seems like a different path than, maybe they don't want to like squish all the text in, but they might want to still go a less expensive or an easier route. So how does someone decide that what you just described, this like beautiful layout of the interior, is their path?
I think it really has to do with the values of the author. If the goal of the author is to crank something out, I mean, look how many people are creating books in 5 minutes with AI, wrapping some sort of cover that they get from Fiverr around it, and throwing it out in the marketplace. They're more concerned with getting a product out there than they are about their own reputation or how they feel about their content. And I kind of think of that as sort of the bottom feeding end of the author spectrum. Then you've got people who say, look, I want to get my book out, but I'm on a budget. So I'm going to buy a Microsoft Word template and do the best I can and do it myself. If you want to spend the time, I think that's fine. And I think it's good enough for a lot of purposes. And then there are people who say, I want my book to be my legacy. I want to leave this behind, and I want to make it excellent in every possible way. And obviously, there's a cost in time and energy and money to do anything the best possible way. But if that's the reflection you want on you, then that's how you do it.
Yeah, and it might also be some people are not expecting to write more than one book in their lifetime. Like this is their book, so they're not going to throw away the chance to make it the best it can be.
Well,
Versus someone, yeah,
you and I know most writers start out with "This is my book."
yeah,
It's like women say, "Oh, I've had my child, I'm done," and then before long they're pregnant again. There's just that instinct to give birth to more books once you get started.
yeah. I never want to actually tell people that up front because I'm afraid they won't want to go through the first one. But it is true, and I think for me, I learned so much through the process of writing, publishing, and marketing the first book that I felt like I had to use that information somewhere again. And I also got the advice. You and I know each other through the National Speakers Association, and I heard the advice over and over again. The way to sell book one is to publish books 2 and 3. And so it was a seed planted early on that was going to happen. I'd love to hear how NSA came into your journey, the National Speakers Association. When did being a graphic designer and being someone who went on this amazing style trip, like become a speaking journey as well?
Well, it's funny, the tie-in, and there's a wonderful story about that. I was referred book clients for editing and design, and the client was a member of NSA. And I had no idea. He explained to me it's the NSA that talks, not the NSA that listens. And anyway, I worked with him and his wife for quite a while getting this book together. We got it edited, got it typeset. He wanted a particular type of look for the cover, so we hired an illustrator who had worked for Disney. It all came together. It was a fun project. And then he called me one day and he said, "Don't tell my wife. I'm going to this NSA convention in San Diego. I'm going to send you a ticket and buy you a hotel room. Please come. Don't tell Barbie. I want to play a joke on her." So he got her down to the restaurant, ostensibly to meet with some old friends, introduced her to somebody, and she ordered her tea with honey as he knew she would. And he had prearranged with the waitress to bring an additional honey. And then this guy's like an old hippie, nicest guy you could imagine. And he gets up and he says, "We didn't ask for more honey. You are disrupting our conversation, and I want to speak to the manager." Now, poor woman is thinking, who hijacked my husband's brain? Who is this person? He's never acted this way toward anybody. Well, I came out wearing the manager's Marriott jacket, and I had the proof copy of their book on a plate with a red napkin. I said, "I'm sorry, there seems to be a problem with the honey. Would you like to try a different kind?" And the book was called Honey, I'm Home. So I handed her the book and I watched her eyes turn into slot machines. But in that process, I thought, who are these people? And I haven't missed an NSA convention since. So
What year is that? How long ago is that?
12 years. So my journey as an author really led me into speaking. And there was one more speaking connection, which is somebody I met when I was crossing the Atlantic in 1991. I met someone from South Africa who'd sailed up solo, Neil Peterson, who went on to become the first Black sailor who raced alone around the world. I lost touch with him when we both left the Azores. And I think it was 14, 15, 17 years later, I reconnected with him on Facebook, and he'd become a speaker. And I said, "What's that?" So again, everything's connected to everything else.
I do think it's hard, whether it's speaking or becoming an author. These are two spaces where it's really valuable to have a community because there's so much you don't know, and you can't see around the corner, but someone else who's a little further ahead on the journey can guide you, or at least point out some of the potholes that you might run into. And it sounds like your graphic design work then led you to the world of publishing generally. Were the early books, though, for business books, or like was it really kind of smoothly into the world of entrepreneurship, or was there a sort of a gap where you were doing books but you weren't yet thinking about it, the business side of that?
My first 3 books were novels, and they were fictionalized accounts of an old friend's amazing stories. And I kind of felt they're a trilogy, and I kind of think of them as my training ground. They're not bad books, but they're not as nowhere near as polished as I could make them now. But I resist the urge to go back and fix them. I mean, they are what they are. Those are my footprints at that time of my life. And then I wrote my sailing memoir, which I spent, I'm not sure how much time writing. And then I sent a chapter to a group of friends every week for a year and got feedback. And then I hired a professional editor and got my butt kicked properly and learned what that process was about. So that was a long, detailed, careful process to get that book out. And from there, I learned so much about publishing. I wrote a book called The 1 Hour Guide to Self-Publishing, which is obsolete now. I pulled it, but it was there. And then I wrote the Writer's Guide to Powerful Prose, which is still a business card of mine. I give that away or sell it cheap at events. And so getting into writing and just moving on into different subjects, writing, speaking, and to me, they're all connected. Even editing and graphic design are connected.
It's just really interesting because the skills and experiences that you acquired in the first 30 years of living and being an adult suddenly became very applicable to this new space. Like you brought in ideas from outside perspectives that actually makes you stand apart from others who are in the speaking or in the author kind of community. I mean, for the speaking part, your storytelling is a differentiator and how you approach that based on your own lived experience. But then even as in the author world, you separate yourself out by like high quality that you bring to your design, both interior and the cover. When did you realize you could pull that in, or was that just sort of a natural inclination for you? We kind of get lumped together as speakers often, and you have to find your way to your own platform. And what did that evolution look like for you?
I think at a certain point in our lives, we all end up wandering around the mall and we come across this sign that says, "You are here." And you kind of have to figure out where you're going and where you've been. So at a young age, when I decided I was going to take off sailing with $30 in my pocket and odd job my way around, I certainly didn't have any idea that I would end up writing books or training sales teams or speaking at conferences. It was not part of my consciousness. But once you get to a certain point in your life and say, okay, what do I want to do next? Why not leverage where you've been? And that requires some creativity, some insight, some self-awareness, but all the good things in life do. So why not look back and figure out, and you don't have to have sailed across the Atlantic or recovered from cancer or taken a business public. If you worked in a cubicle, in 4 cubicles with 3 wacky people, and you've got years of stories, you could talk about that for years. Everybody's got stories. Anybody who's been in a relationship has stories. Anybody who's owned a pet has stories. And as long as we're willing to value the small ones instead of envy other people's big ones, we can find material that will add value to other people's lives.
I met someone my second year at NSA, going back almost a decade, who has a book about leadership based on what he learned from his dogs. so yes, I mean, it's all applicable if you're paying attention. Stories, and it's clearly it's memorable. I'm still thinking about it, right? Like 10 years later. Speaking of that, what is the most effective marketing strategies that you have found for selling your books? What's been your approach?
Well, I don't try to sell my books, because if I sell a book, the book lists for $10 or $15 or $20, and I make my little coffee money from that. So if I can sell books in the back of the room at a speaking event, Or even better, get the meeting planner to negotiate upward by buying a box of books and distributing one to everybody. That's even better. But look, if a book costs $10 and a keynote costs 1,000 to 2,000 times that amount, what am I going to spend my time selling? The book is a business card, and it might be a business card that people buy. It might be a business card that people give away. But I really believe in most cases, when it comes to indie publishing, the author, not the book, is the product.
I think a lot of authors miss that. And even when, joining the National Speakers Association a decade ago, and I'm actually just now celebrating a decade of being part of the community, write a book, write a book, write a book. I have now met with so many authors, 50% of them, who have a book published already. When I ask them to tell me about their book, they do. And when I then say, okay, let's say I'm reading the book and I'm really excited and I want to connect with you and learn from you. Like, what's that journey that I go on? Like, how do I find your contact info? Is there an opt-in in the book? Like, what's the next thing I can do with you for free or for money? And they don't have an answer. Like, half of the people I have met with don't have a clear answer. And a lot of them are indie publishers, meaning they have control over what's inside the book. They're not dictated by a company. But what advice do you have, and what have you done to direct people from your books to hiring you to speak on these stages?
I think it's always important to kick ASK. Put that information in the back of the book. Here's my website. Here are some resources you can check out. Here are my other books. Let people know, because if you're successful as an author, I don't mean successful financially. I mean successful in keeping the reader's attention till the end, which not many authors are. But if you can get them to that back page, then there's a little feeling like, oh my God, the book ended. I'm so sad. Where can I get more? Let them know what is the next step, whether it's another book or they can connect with you with a virtual coffee, or they can come to one of your sessions, or whatever it is. Because we know in the speaking industry, everybody talks about becoming that $1 million speaker. Well, if you can book 50, $20,000 keynotes a year, you'll make that $1 million, and you'll never sleep in your own bed, and you'll hate speaking by the time you're a third of the way through that. So the speakers who are making seven figures are doing it with that auxiliary income. It's all about the follow-up. It's all about the funnel. And the book is part of that. The blog is part of that. The YouTube channel's part of it. It's different for everybody, but it's this network of offerings. And if they all provide value, people will ascend the funnel.
That's actually, I'm so glad you used the word ascend, because I stopped using the term funnel. I use the word pipeline, and I also talk about the attraction marketing, sort of a mountain, because we're inviting them to continue the journey upward with us, as opposed to just like keeping them in the funnel where like it's our job to keep them going down, but they don't know whether they want to go where they're going. I think you get a better outcome when people are choosing it. I'm curious about what kind of lead magnets or resources have you tucked into your books that have worked really well, like have gotten people to want to join your email list or reach out to you or connect with you or do that virtual coffee?
I don't know if anything has worked really well. I'd like to be like, well, I'm your guest and everybody needs to think I've sold millions of books. And I just think the book gives me credibility.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that I wrote so many books on speaking and so many books on writing and so many books on storytelling, people say, okay, well, this is the person I want to hire. There's really nothing in the book per se that I can say, well, I cashed in wildly on this. I wish I could, and I wish I could tell that to our listeners. But I've always found ultimately that my best source of gigs is introductions and referrals.
So it's often introductions and referrals from people who have witnessed you speaking, I'm guessing, or who have become a super fan in some way.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, and that's part of what I think books can do. It opens doors. When I do my author panels, and the success of the authors in those panels varies wildly from brand new, 6 months they've had a book. So they don't even really know what they have yet. And people who have a book, 4 or 16 books out, whoever knows. It opens doors of possibilities, much like when you were out sailing, you could not have looked ahead and seen this life. When you publish a book, you have to have a plan for like what you think the goals should be initially, what success means to you, but then be open. So what are some of the, we've described some of them, but what are the ways people could start to think about what success looks like for a book? How are you measuring the success of a book? Is it that it's helping you land a new talk? Is it book orders coming in, books in a book club? Like, what are some of the things that have come and what's been the most surprising? Like, what's been an outcome that because you're an author, blank happens?
Well, my favorite thing, and it doesn't happen often, but it happens, is when some complete stranger emails me and said, I read your book and I loved it. I just want to thank you for that. And the idea that we can sit in our room and write something and spray it out into the ether, and it somehow lands on somebody and sticks to them and they enjoy it. That's magic. I don't care how much money I make off the book or not. If I can create a message, put it in a bottle, and somebody's better for it at the end, that's the most gratifying thing in the world to me. As far as financial success, I don't even look at my books that way at all. I think in terms of retail sales, God, I've made hundreds of dollars off my books. And if I had to pay somebody else to do the typesetting and design and things like that, I would have lost a lot of money on my books in terms of book sales. But that's not my goal. I think indie authors need to disabuse themselves of this idea that writing a great book is going to make it sell well. I think it was Bob Berg who wrote The Go-Giver, and he said it's not the best, it's called the bestsellers list, not the best writers list. So create the best book you can, but embed it in a plan.
The plan piece, that's the piece I think most people are missing. When I talk to these very new authors, their eyes are still lit up around book sales. And it's like, well, beyond the launch, so I focus on getting reviews. So I have I help authors build launch teams with likely prospects and referral partners. We publish the book, and then we spend 2 to 3 weeks getting the launch team to publish their Amazon reviews. And then we announce it to the world. So we have a sort of soft launch period. Beyond that soft launch period, I don't worry about individual sales because everything else you're describing comes from the success of that out. We basically trying to push the book as far out of the gate as we can and get people noticing it. So the right people are reading it or talking about it or passing it along. And then all the other opportunities come. So I think, I feel like a lot of first-time authors are so focused on the deadline of just publishing. And I'm like, well, it's not a marathon, it's a triathlon. And you only did the first part. You're soaking wet. You're standing by the bike. You're getting ready to get on the next leg of this, and then you still have to run the marathon of marketing for the rest of your life. And I love that you're, the idea of put out good content, put out more good content. I think part of your strategy is that you didn't just write one book about speaking, right, or storytelling. You kept putting out content. You become the go-to person for a topic. That's how I think of you. And I don't know each other super well, but if I had to describe you, storytelling would be definitely in the description, and it fits, right? It makes it easy for me to refer you or talk about you. The second thing I would always talk about, depending on who the person was your detail when it comes to design. And I think it's exceptional, and not many people are paying attention like that. And so for those who are really interested, I hope they do find you and talk to you about that. You and I recently reconnected through the BizBook Publishing Hub, which I also just got the shortened URL, BizBook Pub Hub, which I'm very excited about. I have a new logo coming out, so we're working on that, Dave. I'm curious, why do you think a referral hub like that is needed? How can it benefit both the people who support authors and authors themselves? Like, what are your thoughts, and how does that sort of play out?
I think that it serves two purposes. One is if you're an editor, let's say, then you can find cover designers and typesetters. And whether you want to subcontract them or refer business to them, you have a network of people, a little bit like NSA. if somebody needs a leadership speaker or a happiness speaker, I know who to refer them to. Sorry, I don't get the gig, but it's okay. I can pass that good fortune along to a friend, and that's how we do things. So I think it creates a community of people who are vetted, who can help each other, that kind of thing. And then I think, to the extent that, I mean, look, there are so many people who are just charlatans out there preying on ignorant authors, because people will spend 1,000 hours writing a book and they won't spend a single hour learning about the publishing business. And they end up with these vanity presses. They lose their rights, their royalties. They get burned in so many ways. And we could do a whole episode on that, which we won't. So the idea that there's this one-stop place where you can come, it's like, wow, there's, I don't know, 8 editors here or 12 editors here. Let me contact them, and maybe they'll all mark up the first chapter of my book, and I can choose whose feedback I like best. Or maybe I can look at these cover designers' portfolios, or it's all there. And you can find not just service providers like you can find on Fiverr, you can find experts.
Yeah, that is a big key. And that piece you just said about the charlatans, God, it's so depressing. I recently worked with someone, and this is not even someone who was trying to like pull one over on them, but when I was helping her with the launch of her book, which is a nonfiction book to help her grow her business as a speaker, she told me that the publisher, which had never published a nonfiction book, but she did not know that, 3 times during the editing, she had to get them to stop changing the text in direct quotes from her research because they just did not get it. And they were probably automating the process and editing. And she's like, no, this is a direct quote. We can, so that's the kind of thing you don't deal with if you work with the experts who understand the work that entrepreneurs are trying to achieve. Like, they're using this book. A lot of what you're saying, Dave, is like, the book is a product to help you sell the rest of your services. So someone has to understand that whole picture, whether it's the designer of the cover, like you said, has to understand how it's going to be used, or the person who's helping with the interior or editing, or whatever phase that you're going through. It's really, really helpful. So, and then of course we've got our community events as well. Last thing I want to just kind of ask you is advice that you have for authors who are, getting started, maybe people who are writers, not yet even published, right? They're just still, maybe they're just thinking about a book. Maybe there's someone who went to NSA and was told, you need a book. You really need a book. And like, they were like, okay, fine, I need a book. Beyond just having a book, like what should they have in their head as they're making this process come to life?
So I'll share the same advice I share when I work with speakers, is that lecturers deliver information and speakers deliver transformation. Anybody can write a big, long 250-page article about a topic they either know about or research. That's cost of entry, is knowing your stuff. But can you write your story about your reader? Can you focus on the benefits to them? How are they going to think, feel, or act different after they've read their book? How are you going to transform them? And no matter what you do, whether you're a classroom teacher or a keynote speaker or you're writing a book, you've got to stay focused on the audience. You've got to stay focused on the reader. So figure out, what is the transformation rather than what is your expertise. The second piece, which you didn't ask for, but I'll give you, is it's great to join writers groups and writers associations, but the same with speakers. I mean, I love NSA, and some of my best friends are National Speakers Association people. But if I only go to NSA, guess what? Very few people are going to hire me there, because it's not that they're my competition. Although I guess technically they are. We just don't act that way. But can you find, I mean, if you write a book about basket weaving, then join the National Basket Weavers Association, because those people are going to buy your book. Your fellow authors, I see this all the time on writers forums. Oh, I launched my new book. Congratulations. Nobody buys it. So you get lots of likes and thumbs up and a little dopamine hit from that, but you don't get any business from it.
That's a marketing piece right there. It's like you want to be the only attorney in a room full of writers, and then you become the go-to attorney for writers. We actually have an attorney like that for our hub, our BizBook Pub Hub. There is the first person who ever signed up for the hub is an IP. She's an attorney who does IP and contracts and works with entrepreneurs, and I feel so grateful. But she's smart because she is spending her time and energy around the exact kind of people she wants to have as clients. I'm sure she also belongs to a lawyer group of some kinds for like ongoing education, but we can't just spend time with the people who share our profession. We have to make sure we're also spending time with the people who would want to learn from us and who we can also learn from what they're experiencing and provide even a better service. This is really helpful. What have we not asked you that you want to share? Because I feel like I don't feel like I'm fully hitting your potential, Dave. What am I missing here that is something you've been like dying to tell these would-be authors and authors in general?
I think it's this idea that we exist in one medium is just a falsehood. If you're going to be an author expert, then you need to develop that art of oratory so that you can get in front of a room and network with everybody at the same time. You can't just be that ivory tower expert. So there's not only the transformation, but the ability to speak about your topic. Keep learning and keep writing about it. Okay, you wrote about topic X. Now keep blogging and learning more. What's changing? If you're writing about technology, 6 months ago, AI was okay. Maybe you mentioned it, maybe you didn't. If your book doesn't have AI in it now, you either have to pull it and rewrite it, which you can do with self-publishing, right? Just sneak in a new upload and hope nobody knows the difference. But the other thing is keep blogging about it or write another book. You've got to keep changing and growing, or you're going to transform yourself from an expert to an obsolete source of information.
Yeah,
The world changes fast.
yeah, and a book. I mean, this happens to me literally writing a book. My last book was about Zoom. While writing a book, with obviously there's some things that are universal or evergreen. There's strategies and facilitation techniques which makes the book relevant today. But while writing the book, the techniques, where the button would move while I was writing it. So I know the moment I published it, there are going to be some things wrong in that book. So I had to make sure I wrote a book that was not about the technical pieces. It was about the philosophy, the how do you do design of a session, which doesn't matter what kind of platform you're using. This is just a way to think about the principles of design. So make sure we're also writing books that are relevant beyond the moment, because AI is constantly evolving. Any books that came out 2 years ago in AI are completely obsolete and need to be written
2
over
months
again.
ago, 2 years.
2 years, I know. Well, I was thinking a couple of years ago, because gosh, when my third book came out in 23, I was so heads down writing it, I wasn't paying attention to this AI revolution that was happening around me. And when I went to publish, my book was in the categories of all these AI books. And I was like, what happened overnight? Like it all happened in 2 months. Well, Dave, this has been really fun. I'd like you to share what is the one or two books that people should really go and check out of your 14? What are the ones that sort of like you said, the ones you always mention?
So I think the book for writers, if you're going to be an author, I have a little book called The Writer's Guide to Powerful Prose. And here's a great marketing pitch. It's available for free on speakepedia.com, along with some of my other books. Again, selling the book is not the goal. It's all about writing style. And if you read that book, I guarantee you'll be a better writer when you finish it. It's not a big, thick book, but it's just full of common sense ideas about writing patterns. And then if you want to have some fun, there's a book called The Story, which is a business book wrapped in a novel, where a bunch of people get stranded on an island, end up going sailing around the Bahamas on a schooner. And as they go, they make all of these discoveries about what stories are and how they work. I didn't want to write a book about storytelling because that's just not fun. It's not a story.
Right. Right. That would be,
If you're going to talk about storytelling, tell a story. Otherwise, you're just contradicting yourself. So
I had that issue when I was trying to offered trainings about how to use Zoom to create engaging presentations. It's like, you can't just be this dry and then you click this button. And tell us a little bit about speakopedia.com.
Speakopedia is a project that I worked on over the past year that contains writings that are up to 15 years old, stuff I've been doing for a long, long time. It's about 540 pages of content on writing, speaking, storytelling, publishing, and book design.
That's
And
fantastic.
it's just, there are some AI messaging tools in there that I developed, and those are available by subscription. But it's really, it's the Wikipedia of storytelling.
And you also have remarkable-stories.com. Apologies, remarkable-stories.com. This is a new site, so I don't know much about this one.
The site is really, I mean, we talked about the information versus transformation, and speakopedia.com is full of information. And I hope people use it and enjoy it, and that it reflects well on me. It's a branding exercise, really. But the remarkablestories.com site is really about what kind of transformation I deliver to organizations. And it is art-directed AI. It was created using many different AI tools to write the code and things. And then I just badgered it and corrected it and restored it from backup and tweaked it until it did what I want. But it's a website. Working with AI is like working with a brilliant programmer who has Alzheimer's disease, and they know what they're doing, but they frequently forget what you were just talking about. So you have to keep backing up and say, no, that's not what I wanted. Restore from backup. You spend about a third to half your time just keeping it from transforming your code into something you never imagined. But once you get it across that bridge, you can do things that would have required a team of engineers a few months ago.
That's wild. And then I also know you have a website that talks about your design work, theworldsgreatestbook.com. Tell us a little bit about that.
And that is a website I've had for a long time, and it just talks about the editing and book design services that I offer to authors.
Awesome. So what other places can people find you and follow your work?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook and wherever quality goods are sold.
Fantastic. We're going to put all the links we just mentioned and more, including links to the books and all that, at bizbookpubhub.com. You can check out all the resources there, including we have all these different experts who are guiding entrepreneurs through the writing, editing, publishing, and marketing phases of their author journey, events that I host for writers and authors and speakers every single month. So you can come hang out with us there as well. And all these amazing show notes from the shows that come out every Tuesday and Thursday. So check all that out at bizbookpubhub.com. Dave, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really great conversation.
Robbie, thank you. Anytime.